What's up, guys? If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Also, please smash that like button on the video and enjoy the show.
So my guess would be there's some explanation there that has to do with them following the stars, and they all have some kind of similar understanding. They all probably noticed the same thing. Like, for instance, the Maya and the Sumerians and the Cambodians all followed Venus. They're the three civilizations that they're the only three civilizations that followed Venus, and they had Venus temples that were to follow Venus. So you know the five-sided star, that only comes like the five-sided star, our American five-sided star. That star is not natural. There's nothing that's five-sided that's natural.
That took a minute to go upstairs. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. So like the six-sided star is natural. The eight-sided star is natural. Four-sided is a square, obviously. But a lot of these things are natural. The only thing that's not natural is a five-sided star. If an ancient civilization shows a five-sided star anywhere in their iconography, it means they were following Venus, because where Venus comes up in its not its solar cycles, but its astronomical cycles, if you follow it, the places that it comes up in the sky, people who study astronomy, it makes a five-sided star over the course of a year when it arrives like on the horizon and the way it sets. I'm not an expert in exactly how that works, but I know that a five-sided star is indicative of a civilization following Venus, and that only happened with the best astronomers in the ancient world, which are the Maya, the Sumerians, and the Cambodians, all of which nobody thinks were connected civilizations. So you see these civilizations doing similar things.
The constellation possibility, because like we use the word coincidence and we start to be like, okay, when is this getting to be too much of a coincidence? Yeah. But when you back it with, hey, they're looking at similar things in the sky, even if they're looking at it in different patterns, calling them different things. I'm just going to use a bullshit example right here, but like we know the North Star is the North Star or something like that. Yeah. And maybe that's why they then build these structures. But if they're building them in relation to what they see in the sky, which I'm taking a leap here, but could therefore also probably be some sort of symbolism towards their religion, like towards what they view as God.
Yeah.
But you're talking about cultures in different places that had entirely different religions. Yeah. Some that worshipped multiple gods, some that worshipped one. One thinks that a god is maybe the man in the sky versus the other one thinks the god is like the sun or something. And yet they all point to the stars in a way that like it's almost like a laser beam could go like right at them. How does that line up?
I don't know. It's
a very hard question. I don't expect you to know it, but
it's just it's one of the great mysteries of ancient history that wraps people up in this world. You know, that's kind of that question right there is why people get obsessed with this. You know, because it's more fun than a normal job.
Yeah, it's funny. So, this is the kind of stuff I was never into until a couple years ago. You know, I think it kind of hits you all at once because when you're 20 years old. I mean, I'll speak for myself. Like when I was 20 years old, I don't know. I wasn't thinking about the meaning of it all and whatever. Yeah. I'm thinking about the next party and like having a good time and hopefully getting a good job in a couple of years. But then there's something that happens I guess like shortly after you get out of college where you're like, wait a minute. And I find this with a lot of other people I've spoken to who got into it. You know, they start asking these questions more then. But, you know, the everything that you're saying, you're building a case with evidence. Like, I really appreciate it. And can't say you're wrong. But there's evidence that points in so many different directions.
Definitely.
And there's evidence to things that we can't even concept that get ridiculous. You start talking about, like, aliens or whatever. We'll get to some more of that.
Yeah.
But, like, I don't know if there's... One thing I haven't asked with the pyramids so far in the conversation is some of the utility of them. You've touched on it yourself. But, like, the ones in Egypt, what were the uses for these? Because a lot of the movies get it wrong. They call them all crypts and stuff like that, but that's not really what it was. So what are the reported uses of them? Yeah,
well, first off, I appreciate you saying that. I back some of my things with evidence. I try to, it's tough because, you know, I came into this world of studying ancient history from more of like the skeptic side of being into all these mysteries and kind of believing more of the what archaeologists call fringe. But I've kept that sense of wonder the whole time I've gotten into it. But, you know, you get deeper and deeper and deeper. And the truth, you realize the truth is neither here nor there.
Right.
It's somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And so a lot of these guys in my space, they come in with some of like the most out there theories. And they're real hard behind them. But, you know, somebody who's like a layman listening to it might not understand why it's not accurate. But for somebody who has a more orthodox understanding of history, you can kind of see some of the holes in it. And so, you know, the way I try to approach things is I don't want to come on here and talk about ancient Egypt without having some kind of background knowledge of ancient Egypt. You know, that doesn't mean somebody has to have a degree like I do. That just means like, okay, you want to talk about the mysteries of the old kingdom pyramids and how they could have been built by different civilization. Who was the last pharaoh of the old kingdom? And if you can't answer that, why are you having a conversation with me about it? You need to. I'm not talking to you, but I'm just saying. No, I mean, but I'm just saying you don't even know what you're talking about. How could you have an argument when you don't know the fullest extent of the orthodox side?
Well, that's also the danger of like the industry I'm in, and it's not just podcasting. It's like it's the danger of like the internet and having a microphone or a reason to put stuff on there. You know, I feel like a lot of people aren't checking their background knowledge at the door is a better way to put that, but you know what I mean? Yeah. You know, in what I do, sometimes I feel like when people reach out to me like in DMs and ask me specific questions about stuff, I mean, I appreciate the fact that like they're engaged, but I'm also like a lot of times I'm like, why are you asking me this? Like I am a podcaster, bro. Like I'm bringing people on to try to explain it to me and me challenge them and make them have to like defend it. My job is not to know, but it's like good for you to say that because God, it seems like everyone's an armchair expert on every goddamn thing these days. And I'm not even saying it's intentional. Like I don't think people are like bad people or like being an asshole about it, but like you feel compelled to have to comment on all this stuff and not put things behind it. And like if I get, but especially when I get things wrong, which does happen all the time, like I'll correct it. I'll be like, oh fuck, I missed that one. I was on a podcast recently where I cited a story that turned out to, I believe based on the evidence we looked at, I'm pretty sure it's like fake news. It was something like purported by China's state-run media arm. Okay. And then that was clearly something they were putting out for like propaganda. It wasn't true. But like, you know, I feel like a lot of people aren't leaning into, oh shit, yeah, we weren't right about that one, or oh, you know, I missed that one. Whereas my attitude's always been like, all right, well, let's fucking pull it up and figure out if this is bullshit or not. You know, and in your type of field, any field, but like in yours, you need more people who are willing to do that, and you need more people like you who can come in here with things that they clearly have expertise on, but also point out the fact, like when we're talking about ancient history, we're talking about the whole world. Yeah. You're not an expert on everywhere in the world. You may have a generalized knowledge of a lot of stuff because you're crazy and study all this stuff all the time. But like you're not, I appreciate you not pretending to be fucking Professor X on every goddamn thing. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. I certainly appreciate that. Okay. So pyramid utility. Yes. So I love how I don't have to transition it back in. You know where you are. It's great. Yeah. So pyramid utility. So man, that's kind of the pitfall of the lost civilization community is, you know, they look at, and I'm going to put myself in that group because I think there's plenty of crap out there that's like, well, how do we explain this? This could have been built 12,000 years ago, you know. Certainly Göbekli Tepe almost was that old. But in that community, there isn't an explanation as to what they would have been other than tombs. People just go, no, they definitely weren't tombs, and they definitely weren't built by the Egyptians. But look at all this evidence that points towards how old they are, but they don't really answer that question of like what their utility would have been. You know, and that's okay. They don't have to have it. They don't really have to have an explanation for that. I'm not asking them to come up with an explanation.
But you look at the interior architecture of them and how strange the chambers are. Have you ever seen like a diagram of the inside of Khufu's pyramid or Khafre's pyramid or the
Maybe.
Yeah. You can pull it up. It's very odd. And so one of the most common explanations is that they may have been like a water pump, that there could have been water pumping in and out of them to help cultivate agriculture. So you see the inside of this. So some people subscribe to the ram pump theory.
Which one do you want?
Maybe like the top right one.
Top right?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, we'll put this in the corner of the screen. Go
It's
ahead.
not exactly the easiest to see, but it's very odd the way that it's built. And there's not exactly a perfect Egyptological orthodox explanation of why it's built like this, anyways. So you see the slanted interior. That's the Grand Gallery.
When you're pointing to this slanted interior, are you talking about the white space right there?
Yeah. The white space, the large
Like
one,
the thicker one.
Yeah, that's the Grand Gallery. There's really no known usage of that Egyptologists put forth. Okay. And then what that leads up to, which you see like the little, it's like a little raised part.
Yep. Like a temple kind of looking
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. It's kind of like a temple on the inside. They don't have they say that's the king's chamber where Khufu would have been buried. His name's not in there. And there is a sarcophagus in there. And the sarcophagus was certainly put in that chamber at the time that it was built. Here's a really interesting thing. So whoever built it didn't want that sarcophagus to be taken out of the pyramid, because the one entrance into that chamber is smaller than the sarcophagus itself. So the sarcophagus wasn't moved in there, it was built in there, and then the roof was put on. So it's really interesting. So we know that sarcophagus was in there the day that the ceiling was put on the king's chamber, which alludes to it being a tomb, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I don't really see any arguments against that either. Any sufficient arguments saying, if it wasn't a tomb, well, why is that sarcophagus in there? So some of the other usages are like what I've come to believe now, and it's a little bit disappointing. Like, I'm going to be honest. The 20-year-old me is a little bit disappointed that 26-year-old me is like, yeah, they're tombs, but they're really freaking elaborate tombs that we can't explain how they were built. People can't forget that. The mystery is still there, but probably it was a tomb. What the other theories of the usages is like a ram water pump. So Egypt obviously is not in an abundance of water outside of the Nile. So they have to build these machines called shadoofs. Oh, dude, speaking of the word machines, Herodotus comes and visits
Greek
Egypt.
guy.
Yeah, comes and visits Egypt in either 450 BC or like 900 BC. And one of the priests tell him, and we know that they have writing. This is what I was getting at with the Diary of Merer. I kind of lose my track a little bit because I go down all these rabbit holes.
No,
but
that's all right. There's a lot of that.
what he was talking about with the Diary of Merer, we know that they were writing things down all the way back to the time of the supposed building of the first pyramid. So it's likely. That's why okay. Now I'm getting it all together. So I said that because it's still probable that the priest that Herodotus spoke to was probably reading documents that were written and rewritten from back at the time of the Great Pyramids, because they were writing back then. And so the documents were passed down. Herodotus shows up in either 900 BC or 450 BC, meets with this Egyptian priest who takes him to Giza, and he tells Herodotus that the pyramids were built with machines. He literally says machines. That's not disputed by anybody.
And do we know what he could have been referring to with that?
Nope. There's no adequate explanation. It just says machines. The reason I remember that is because another thing that's referred to as an Egyptian machine is a shadoof, which is something that brings water from the Nile River. Like sometimes they were on cliff sides, especially in Upper Egypt, which is South Egypt. A lot of it's cliff sides. So they built these shadoofs, which were ancient Egyptian machines, to be able to bring the water up from the Nile all the way up on top of the cliff that they were on to help grow their crops. That made me think of machines. So that's another little nugget that alludes towards something else being used. But it doesn't allude towards something that's an ancient lost civilization, when Herodotus himself said that there were priests in Egypt that were telling him that the pyramids were built using machines.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. Please hit that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.